So welcome back everybody. I hope you're all doing well. My name is Andy with Boatworks today, and this week and going forward, we're shifting back over to the Bertram, finally. So with that said, let's get started. So as I'm sure you've noticed, for the past few weeks, I've taken a bit of a break from the Bertram here, and honestly there's a good reason for that. Basically, Papa needed to save up some money for the new coring material, which has since come in. That's what's in the box behind me here. Now, I'll get into what I decided to go with here in a minute, but going into this project, my thought on what I was going to be using had shifted quite a bit. Initially, I had full intentions of just using marine grade plywood, Okume or Marianti, the BS 1088 plywood. And there's nothing wrong with that. I've used that material on probably hundreds of projects, and I've never had a single problem. But with the work that I've done on here so far, something that I realize is that with the exception of the transom, there is no wood coring anywhere on this boat. There is nothing on this boat to rot, absolutely nothing. And that kind of shifted my thoughts on what kind of material I wanted to use for rebuilding the cockpit and replacing the bulkheads and that kind of stuff. So I kind of wanted to follow that same suit and go with something that was not going to rot, was not going to warp on me. It essentially was going to be impervious to moisture. Now, as far as what I decided to go with, it's the Coosa paneling, or the Coosa board, specifically their Blue Water 26. Now, if you're not familiar with it, Coosa board is essentially a fiberglass reinforced foam panel. And given that this is their Blue Water 26 line, I presume that means that it's reinforced with 26-pound density foam. Now, in total here, I bought 3 sheets of 1/2 inch and 3 sheets of 1/4 inch. The 1/2 inch is going to be used for the new bulkheads, building out the cockpit modifications that I wanted to incorporate there, and as well as creating some of the support knees to help give some stiffness to the side decks or to the gunnels. And the 1/4 inch is what I'm going to be using for basically the side coverings underneath the gunnels to create some storage space and just kind of finish off the inside of the hull. So now, as I had mentioned, I have never worked with this stuff before. Right now, as of now, I have no idea how it cuts, sands, shapes, how well it, how much resin it absorbs, what kind of resins work best with it. And given the price on this stuff, now granted, it is quite a bit more expensive than plywood, but again, it has a lot of advantages going for it. One that really kind of stood out in my mind is that it's an American-based company. I believe they're based out of Pelham, Alabama. So, right there, I like supporting American companies just straight across the board as much as I can. But given the price on this stuff, I don't want to have any screw-ups because screw-ups can be very, very costly. So I need to do a little bit of kind of playing around to get familiar with how it works and that kind of thing. So before we get into that though, first things first, I need to make sure that I actually ordered enough material. Now I know it's going to be close as far as what I need and what I ordered. I think I had a little bit of leftover just for cut-offs and one small oopsie, but we'll see. But first things first, as I mentioned, the 1/2 inch is going to be used for the plywood or the bulkheads, as well as building out the cockpit area. So let me grab the bulkheads. Luckily, they're still intact. I can use those as templates. But let me kind of lay things out here just to see how tight I am actually on the materials. All right, so this is pretty cool. I was able to get basically both of the bulkheads and the door out of one panel. Now, although that's cool, that also means I'm a bit of an idiot because for some reason I thought for sure it was going to take me 1.5 of these Coosa panels. So but that's all right. That's all right. I'll wear that idiot card proud. But that's the good part of that, though, is that it leaves me 2 full panels for building out the cockpit area, and as well as cutting out the support knees for alongside the gunnels. So I think for the 1/2-inch material, I should have plenty of material left to do what I have outlined here. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I've never worked with this stuff. So before I start slicing and dicing and potentially making a mess out of things, I want to do a little bit of testing just to get a feel for how well it sands, how shapes, carves, that kind of thing. Also, these panels, I don't want them at 1/2-inch. The reason I bought them at 1/2-inch is because I later realized, again, not ever having worked with this material, that these panels need to be fiberglassed on both sides to get the desired thickness. Now, my finished thickness that I'm looking for is actually 3/4 inch. So again, just to get a feel for how much glass I'm going to have to apply on each side, I'm going to guess with 3 layers per side of 1708. But in order to get a materials list put together for ordering the amount of fiberglass and resin that I need, or epoxy, I need to get a feel for how much material I'm going to have to lay up in here to get that finished thickness. These are all questions that I want to have, I guess, hammered out before I actually start, again, like I said, start slicing and dicing and making parts that are actually going to be mounted up on the boat. So the less questions I have going into a project, the more comfortable I feel about it. So let me, I'm going to cut out a little strip, and I can kind of, well, you can't see it here, but I can see roughly how much space off of this first panel I have to kind of play with. So like I said, I'm going to cut about a 4 or 5 inch wide strip off along the bottom that's essentially going to be scrap, and that's going to be my play samples. So let me break out the saw and get some strips cut off. So this Coosa does actually cut very, very nicely. Standard jigsaw, or I should say jigsaw blade, and it was honestly a little bit easier than cutting plywood, surprisingly. Even though there's fiberglass in here, I'm sure that's going to take put a hurt on the blades, over a period of cuts. But overall, it cut very, very well. Now, as long as I've got it here, before I do anything more with it, I just want to give you a quick little close-up as far as what the cross-section of it looks like. Now it appears, and I don't know if this is the case, but it appears that there's a layer of glass along the bottom as well as the top. And I don't know if there's more in between in the middle or how it's all actually laid out throughout the panel. But at least as on this piece right here, that's how it seems. Now, there's going to be a number of tests that I'm going to be doing on this, but I'm going to be starting those tomorrow. But one of them I need to get started tonight. And the first one is, how much moisture will Coosa actually absorb without being treated with anything? Now, I have no idea. So here I've cut off basically 2 pieces. One chunk of the Coosa, and then another chunk of this plywood. Now this is 3/4 inch Marianti plywood. This is 13 ply, 3/4 inch. And this is actually BS 1088 rated. It's some of the best plywood that money can buy, okay? This is, for the most part, when you're talking about plywood, this is pretty much the gold standard. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an initial moisture reading of both of these, and then I'm going to stick them in a bucket of water for the night, and just kind of see how much the number changes from tonight when it's dry versus tomorrow after roughly about a 20-hour soak. Now, I have not calibrated this because for this example, it's somewhat irrelevant. I'm not looking to actually see what the true moisture content is. What I'm going to be looking for is to see what the difference is. So whether it's reading 10 or 20 or 30% right now is irrelevant. It's going to be what it reads now versus what it's going to read tomorrow after the soak. So the plywood itself is reading 24. Now, if I were to actually calibrate this, I'm guessing the moisture content of this wood would probably be closer to 10 or 12%. It's really humid in the shop right now. Whereas the Coosa, that's sitting at 5. So, or 6, give or take, low. So, where's my bucket? So for right now, into the pool they go. And, well, this Coosa is a lot more buoyant than the plywood. But I'm going to weight them down somehow because I want them completely submerged. So let me get that contraption put together. And like I said earlier, I'll see you in the morning. So good morning. It is the following day. Now, just as a little bit of a prep work that I've done off camera, that leftover strip that we had of the Coosa, I cut that into 3 equal pieces. These are, 3.5 by 14 inches long. And the kids here have been in the pool for about 20 hours. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull these out. And I'm going to let them air dry for just a little bit. I'm going to, pad off some of the excess water here. But for the most part, I'm just going to let them air dry for probably a half an hour. Just so that the surface itself dries out a little bit. And again, I'm not looking to test the moisture that's on the surface. I want to test to see what kind of moisture has actually gotten into the center of these pieces. So I'm going to let these dry. And in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and cut the strips of the 1708 so that I can cover these. Now I'm going to be doing 2 samples, but technically 3 samples. One of these is going to be covered with 3 layers of 1708, both sides, using epoxy. Another one is going to be done the same way using polyester resin. And this last one, I think I'm going to leave this one dry for doing, I suppose you might call it destructive testing. So basically I want to see how far these things can bend before they actually snap. So let me let these things do their thing, and let's go over and cut some 1708. So for this sample, I'm going to be using the Total Boat, their 2-to-1 epoxy, primarily because it's a little bit thinner viscosity than their 5-to-1. So I think being a thinner viscosity, it's going to be easier for wetting out the 1708, as well as I'm going to be using their laminating polyester resin. Now, again, the thing to remember here, the reason I'm doing this is to try and figure out how many layers of fiberglass I need to lay up on top of these half-inch strips of Coosa in order to reach a finished thickness of 3/4 of an inch. Now, in general, each layer of 1708 gives you a little bit less than a 1/16 of an inch of thickness. If I had to guess, I want to say it's around 2 millimeters, give or take. So I'm anticipating that it's basically going to be 3 layers on each side. That should give me close to a 1/4 inch. So a 1/4 inch plus the thickness of this Coosa, which is a 1/2 inch, should bring me right up to that 3/4 inch thickness, in theory. So let me get gloved up here, and I'm going to start off with the 2-to-1 epoxy. So my fin roller is a little boogered up because I didn't clean it. So I don't know if this is going to work or not. Oh yeah. Look at all this excess wait. So watch all this excess resin in the air get pushed out to the bottom or through the end here. this is still looking a little light right back in here, so I'm going to give just a tad more resin and try to work that in. Now, one thing I kind of want to mention here, because this seems to be a consistent question that comes up whenever people see me doing layups here. Now, when I was laying the epoxy down, I was pretty much dogpiling it on, and that's fine. You know, I've talked about having resin-rich layups, but you can pile as much resin as you want on. Any of the excess that the glass cannot hold on to, when you come over with the fin roller, that's what pushes out all the excess. So if you have too much, the excess just gets pushed out and you're left with a perfectly lean resin to glass ratio. Here. That looks good. I don't see any air voids. I don't see any dry spots. I'm happy with this. Let me get this roller cleaned up and we'll be right back. And now for the poly. I'm trying to do about 6 ounces. Well, maybe 4. I think 4 will be enough. So for now, I'm on hold a bit until the resin on these samples sets up. And then at that point, I'll flip them over and I'll just repeat the same process on the other side, doing 3 pieces of the 2-to-1 epoxy as well as 3 pieces with the laminating poly resin. And then I'll go ahead and I'll trim up the edges and we'll see how it turns out. But I'll probably do that part off camera. Now, the last thing I want to do before I guess turn the camera off and unplug everything, because we've got a big storm coming, is I want to take the moisture readings off of these 2 samples here. Now, these have been sitting here air drying for about an hour, and let me grab my meter here. I have not made any changes to the moisture meter. I haven't done anything. So let's see what we got here. Now, if I remember correctly, the Coosa metered in around 4%. I'll have to go back and look at the footage here, but I believe it metered in around 4%. And right now, it's metering in around, 15%. And I suspect that within a couple hours, this thing would be dry back down to the 4 or 5%. Now, for the plywood, I can tell just by looking at it, this is still pretty visibly wet. So let's see what we got here. Now, last night, it was at 25. Right now, we're at, 53? So that more than doubled. That more than doubled. As did the Coosa, but the Coosa is still within an acceptable moisture range. I mean, in my book, anything under 10, 12% is still fine. It's still what I considered, good enough for laminating. So I don't know. I'm just gonna leave these pieces sit out here overnight, and then I'll take another reading tomorrow morning and see what kind of changes there are. So until then, I'm gonna unplug everything before I hear a bang and a bzz and a puff of smoke. So we've got some, like I said, we've got some big storms coming. So last thing I need to do is blow up my gear. So I will be back after this storm passes. All right, so now is the moment of truth, but before we actually take our measurements, because remember, I'm trying to get to a finished thickness of 3/4 of an inch, I want to kind of show you how well both of these resins, actually both the epoxy and the poly, how well they actually worked with this Coosa. So here's, let's see, this is the poly. You know, it's a good, even thickness, top and bottom. You know, it looks really, really nice. And the same thing with the epoxy. Now, as far as how much weight was added, quite a bit. Unfortunately, I don't have a scale to actually weigh it, but I would say it's at least probably 3 times heavier than the plain Coosa by itself, and again, that's to be expected. But the thing I am very curious about right now is, did the 3 layers on each side, did that actually build us up to 3/4 of an inch final thickness? So, calipers, because calipers don't lie. So we're going to take our thickness here, and because the battery on my meter here is about 3 years dead, I got to do this old school. So, let's see, I'm going to have to do this, but whoa, there's a magnet on here. Ah! It is 3/4 of an inch on the nose. Perfect. Good. I mean, I'll admit 6 layers is a little bit more than what I wanted to have to lay up, but these things are going to be bulletproof. I could test that. Maybe I'll save that for Patreon. All right, so now it's time just to have a little bit of fun. Make sure everything's recording. All right. All right, so first up is going to be the poly. And again, this is not scientific, all right? This isn't a lab, this is a fiberglass shop, all right? So I don't have any of the fancy gear to actually give this some real scientific testing. This is about as science as I get. So this is a 3-pound sledge. And again, right here, I'm basically just checking to test impact. You know, is the glass going to delaminate? Is it not? So let's find out. Okay, that was one side. We'll try the other now. All right. Now the epoxy. There's a good square hit. All right, now we'll try the other side. Dang. This may actually be bulletproof. All right, no, I'm not expecting anything. I will be curious to see if this actually cracks, though, or breaks. Yep. Try the other side just to keep it even and keep it fair. That was kind of close. Now the poly, that was the first one that we hit. And, well, a little bit of a miss hit there. This one was a little bit better. Basically, I didn't want the thing to ricochet and come up and hit me in the face. But when you look at the edges here, now this edge right in particular, you got a hit on there and there. So this edge took the majority of it. Absolutely zero delamination, no separation. I mean, there's obviously damage to the glass, but you know, on an impact, that's to be expected. Now with the epoxy, again, similar thing. I don't know, I must have had a thing with hitting the edges, but again, no delamination, no separation. Just, it all looks good. Now the bare Coosa, or the panel that did not have any glass. Now obviously, you know, this material is meant to be glassed both sides, so it's no surprise that there was some pretty significant damage to this one. But I mean, it broke. But again, no real surprise there. It's not intended to be used like this without any glass, at least not for structural areas that might take any kind of an impact. So again, I just wanted to kind of have a bit of a baseline, you know, bare material. Again, this is thinner, so it's not, again, apples to apples comparison, because now these other two samples were 3/4 inch, so obviously they're going to be a lot stronger. But what this tells me is that, again, with very, very basic testing, either material, either the poly or the epoxy, worked fantastic with this Coosa as far as maintaining a bond. Now, since I am going to be painting this, once everything is all said and done, the bulkheads are in and all that other good stuff, I am going to be painting it. I'm not going to be gel coating it. Now, if I was going to be gel coating all of this, I would be limited to having to use polyester resin for the layup, just for compatibility reasons. But since I'm going to be looking to paint this, epoxy is a more stable resin to use when you're going to be finishing with paint, just because paint is such a high gloss, it shrinks less, and it's, well, not that our moisture prevention is really an issue with the Coosa, but it does do a little bit better job with the keeping moisture from wicking through. So I think on my project, I'm actually leaning towards. Ooh, I got slivers in my hand. Man, you guys weren't kidding. This stuff is like quills. But anyways, for this project here, I'm actually leaning towards using epoxy, even though it's more expensive. It's going to give me a longer working time to get the glass wetted out, get it all situated, and just exactly the way I want it. Whereas right now, I mean, if I were doing this in the middle of winter, I keep my shop around 60-ish in the wintertime. That would give me quite a bit longer working time if I were using poly, but since it's summer and it's about 80-some in the shop here, that polyester would go up like that. So for the extended working time, I think I'm going to be sticking with the epoxy. Specifically the 2-to-1, as I mentioned earlier in this video, just because it's a thinner viscosity, it'll be easier to wet out the 1708. So I think that's what I'm going to go with. So one last thing before we wrap up this video is I wanted to do a follow-up on the moisture levels of these two little samples that we had swimming in the bucket here overnight. Now, these have been air drying for a day and a half. Okay. Now, if I remember right, the Coosa, when we soaked it initially, or when we checked it dry, it was around 4% moisture, and then after 24 hours in the bucket, I think it went up to 12 or 13. I have to look through the footage here. So now that it's been air drying again, we're right back down to 4. So basically, any moisture that did collect on here when I read it at around that 12-13%, it was all just on the surface. It didn't actually permeate into the center of this this piece. So, okay, so I will say, you know, Coosa's legit, or Coosa's claim that it doesn't absorb moisture, again, just off of this one panel, I would have to say that they're true. It's telling the truth. Oh, wow. Now, the plywood. Now, if I remember right, when I first checked it, it was around 25%. And again, these actual numbers themselves aren't important. What I'm looking to compare are the before and after numbers and how much of a discrepancy there is between those two. Now, if I remember right, I think the plywood, again, this is Marianti, it's BS 1088, marine grade plywood, best that money can buy. I believe that was around 25% before we soaked it. And then I don't remember what the number was after soaking. But as of right now, it's still up to 55. So, not really surprised by that. Well, a little bit. I thought the plywood would have shed more moisture than that. but yeah, it is what it is. So Coosa, relatively unchanged. Plywood did absorb, and it's holding on to moisture. Now, it hasn't degraded, it hasn't been exposed long enough and had enough time to dry, but it's not delaminated or anything like that. But again, just over that short period of time, I wouldn't really expect it to either. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you found it helpful or informational. And if you did, hit that thumbs up button, please. It really helps a lot. If you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button. By the time you're seeing this, hopefully, I may have hit that silver play button goal, hopefully, because you're not going to see this for, well, actually, Patreon will be seeing this on Monday, which is hopefully when I'm hoping that's going to happen. We'll see. But anyways, if you're not already subscribed, I'd love to have you on board. Please hit that subscribe button. And I hear everybody saying this, but I've never really mentioned it. Click the bell. I really don't know how much of a difference it actually makes, because you hear so many people complaining about it, but it can't hurt, right? So you hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you are notified whenever new videos come out. And if you have any questions, comments, please leave those down below and I'll do my best to get back with you. And as always, thank you for your time and thanks for watching.
This has been a Boatworks Today production.